Welcome to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Our host is Dave Garrison from Ohio Christian University, a longtime Fortune 100 company top executive and a former U.S. Congressional Candidate from Texas. Our goal for the Faith and Liberty Talk Show is to give you an opportunity to listen to interviews and discussions with significant authorities and experts on subjects related to Christians engaging in the civil and political arena. The mission of the show is to give you real information and not sound bites that you can really use. We have a website for the show, faithandliberty.org. At this website, you can obtain more information about the show, our guests, subscribe to our newsletter, and become a friend of the show, and like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page. You can also access all of our previous shows. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If our show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. Now, let's begin today's show. Thank you for joining us.
Today, we have the wonderful pleasure of having Ashley Pratte from Young America's Foundation, which most of us know it as YAF. And Ashley is responsible for managing communications and media outreach for Young America's Foundation, handling press releases, social media, interviews, and op-eds. How long have you been doing that, Ashley?
Well, thank you for having me on. I've actually been doing this for only 2 months, so it's been a fast learning process here, but the foundation, as you know, is a great organization, and they do a lot to promote and preserve the legacy of President Reagan. And we actually own the Reagan Ranch Center, and we preserve that out in Santa Barbara, California. So that's one of our pinnacle achievements, I guess you could say, is the fact that we, own and preserve the Reagan Ranch, and we actually host student conferences out there. So it's great to give students exposure to the conservative movement, especially through, the eyes of President Reagan.
Well, that's fantastic, and the listeners to this show are very familiar with my love of Ronald Reagan, and I always bring up that my aunt went on a date with him when in college.
Oh, my goodness.
And, yeah, my uncle was the president of the Alumni Association at Eureka, so we have a connection there and have always had it, and it's a great heritage. Now, Ashley, you, as I understand, were born and raised in New Hampshire and were student body president at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, and that's a college that I don't think we've had anyone interview from. So that's a neat distinction. And why did you pick there?
I actually ended up getting a full tuition scholarship there, so it made my decision pretty easy to not come out of college with student loan debt. And it's actually an amazing, amazing college. It's a liberal arts education, and it's a Catholic institution. And it's tucked away in Manchester, New Hampshire, but it's a gorgeous campus. And it's really based on the liberal arts tradition. And, we were required to take our philosophy courses as well as theology courses as well as a requirement for graduation. They really tried to expand your mind in that sense and really kind of get into the weeds of religion and our foundation, which is more of the philosophical sense of it. So I studied political science and minored in communication there. And that's actually every 4 years where they hold the presidential debates. So it's a pretty neat campus for anyone who's into the public policy aspect of things.
And you've also been the assistant, I guess it was a press assistant to Congressman Frank Ginter.
Actually was mayor of Manchester, New Hampshire for a while, and he was the first, kind of person in higher office that I had looked up to when I was in high school, and that's how I had eventually gotten involved in the conservative movement. So when he ran for Congress, I decided to work on his federal staff and had been with him up until he lost in 2012.
Additionally, I understand you were the executive director of Cornerstone Policy Research and Cornerstone Action, which is a conservative group in Manchester. That's kind of a oxymoron for New Hampshire.
Yeah, it is. And, the Family Policy Council movement is one that has been growing throughout the years. And, the affiliates throughout the country, you have Focus on the Family and Family Research Council here in D.C. That are kind of the umbrella organizations for the Family Policy Councils. But it was a great opportunity, and I learned a lot from it. But when the opportunity arose to to come out here to work for Young America's Foundation, I jumped at the chance because it's a fantastic organization. The people here are great, and our president, Ron Robinson, is a fantastic person and a great mentor for young people when it comes to the conservative movement. He's just been behind so much of what has happened, and it's really incredible to have the opportunity to come down here and work for a foundation as awesome as this one.
That's fantastic. And I imagine a lot of our listeners have seen you either on Hannity or Fox and Friends, Cavuto. You have been published in the Washington Times. I know you do the YAF blog. And recently, I think you've been writing even for Town Hall, haven't you?
Actually just today. So
now, here's the question I want to ask a New Hampshire gal before we move to some of the serious subjects. I, being from Texas, who's sitting here in our studio interviewing you in a pair of Lucchese cowboy boots, how is it that a New Hampshire gal likes cowboy boots and country music?
I honestly don't know, but my extended family is from Gulfport, Mississippi, so that could give you an inclination. But my mother moved up to New Hampshire, and my father was born and raised in New Hampshire, and that was how they met. And then we stayed up there, and at least my family, most are below the Mason-Dixon line. So I grew up listening to country music, absolutely loved it. I have, a couple pairs of cowboy boots myself, Ariats and Justins. Those genuine boots. But I'm very jealous of the pair that you just mentioned. Those are quite expensive, though. But maybe one day I'll purchase a pair of those.
Well, to run for Congress in Texas, you have to have a pair of Lucchese cowboy boots. So I had Ariats and Justins and others before I ran for Congress. Tell us a little bit about your responsibilities at YAF, because I think it's fascinating.
Certainly. So a lot of what Young America's Foundation does, we put on different programs and conferences for young students who are looking to get involved in the conservative movement, and we seek to introduce them to the conservative movement as well. So my role basically is to assist our programs team, which is responsible for putting on these different conferences and lecture series that we host. But in addition, I also do all of our media outreach. So when it comes to pitching stories from college campuses where we have our separate YAF chapters all across the country that come to us and they say, hey, this is happening on our campus. We think it would be of interest to you. And we every year actually put out this top 10 politically correct offenses on campus. And it actually gets pretty interesting. So this year when we put them out, it was fascinating to me coming on board, just 2 months ago to see what had happened throughout the year and seeing what stories, had made like news outlets like Breitbart or even Fox News for the things that were happening right here on our college campuses. Some of them were completely ridiculous and egregious, and you just really see free speech of students being violated on these different campuses.
So as a communications director, are you fielding the media requests and communicating the official positions?
Exactly. So that's what my job consists of. So when I pitch a story, it's kind of going out there and speaking on behalf of the foundation and really trying to get our message out there and how we're out there to help young conservatives, in the movement, and how we're a voice for these students who feel, somewhat voiceless on their college campuses.
And you also have, let's do it this way. When you run for political office, all the consultants tell you, especially when you're running for national office, to have what they call an elevator speech, 2 minutes or so, that explains what you're all about, trying to capture the voters' attention. What's your elevator speech for YAF?
Sure. Well, Young America's Foundation has been around since 1960, when William F. Buckley got involved in the movement. And essentially what the whole point of Young America's Foundation being founded was to, again, address the issues of liberal bias on college campuses, which we have seen become more of an issue as we, continue into this, millennium. And it's been, obviously a huge issue across college campuses, seeing the progressivism that's happening, whether it comes to the books that are being assigned to students, the lesson plans. And young Americans really need an outlet to be able to engage with other young conservatives and to speak freely and to realize that, while they may attend school there, they don't have to agree with everything that's being taught. So it's a great outlet for young people who actually, value their conservative opinions to be able to express themselves. And we provide them with the resources to do that through our speakers that we have connections with. We bring them on to different college campuses. We host different conferences and lectures throughout the year with prominent conservative leaders.
And as you probably are aware, but I'm not sure the listeners are, we have a conference that we're jointly sponsoring here at Ohio Christian University on April 10th with Star Parker and Kate Obenshane.
They're both
who
awesome.
I believe was,
yeah.
Yes, they're awesome. And Kate actually worked at YAF, I think, in the
Yes, she did. She's actually been a fantastic resource for me coming on board.
Yeah, we like her a lot, and we interviewed her some months ago, and she did a great job, and we appreciate the partnership we have with YAF. There are not a whole lot of YAF chapters in Ohio, but we happen to have one, and you're absolutely right. So let me ask you kind of a question that I'm always curious about people who have been on Fox News or interviewed in the national media. You've been kind of a favorite, apparently, lately at Fox about the misery index. Would you explain what the misery index is about?
Yes, so every year Young America's Foundation puts out our Youth Misery Index, and we've been calculating this since 1993. And essentially what we do is we take the youth unemployment numbers, and we take the national debt per capita, so that's breaking down the current $17 trillion debt to each individual. And then we take the student loan debt average. So for 2013, we generated the number 98.6 for our Youth Misery Index, which is the highest that it's ever been. So youth unemployment in 2013 was 16.3%, plus then you add the national debt per capita, so that was $52,948. So you break that down to 52.9. And then the student loan debt average was $29,400, so 29.4 on our scale. So when you add those three numbers up, you calculate 98.6. So we went all the way back to 1993, so that way we could show that, under President Bush, which is when a lot of people, are quick to blame him for a lot of our economic failures and everything, it had not raised as much as it did under President Obama, which was an increase of 18.1%, which was 4 times as much as what had happened under President Bush. So what you have seen, essentially, is that the national debt has grown so much under this president. I believe it's 32%, the highest of any president, which to us, you could, really break it down to the point that because of his economic policies and his reckless spending, what you're seeing is that young people are economically not able to succeed as they once were. And, many of them are graduating from college with, again, massive debt. They're living in their parents' basements and, if they're lucky, maybe getting a part-time job. But it becomes almost impossible to be able to pay off your debt. And then you're being saddled with this huge national debt, which, many young people, I think, they see a $17 trillion number, and it seems so distant from them because it's so large. So when we break it down to the $52,000 per person, that's when it really becomes real. That's your share of the federal debt. And when you see the programs and the spending that are being, implemented by, the liberals in Washington and under the Obama administration, it's really just a cycle of reckless spending, which becomes dangerous for us young people who, when we're looking, at our retirement, it's not looking like a very, hopeful future for any of us. I myself am almost 25 years old, and, it's very difficult to try to save and try to pay off, debt that you might owe when it comes to being able to go to college or grad school. And a lot of people are putting off, trying to further their education simply because they can't afford it. And if they can, then they're faced with a tough economic climate and a job market where they're not able to get a job.
Here's Bebo Norman for Compassion International.
Compassion's commitment to integrity is incredibly important to me, only because I, like many other people, can tend to be very skeptical of what relief organizations or what they're about or where the money goes and all of those things. And I just have seen firsthand what happens with the money that people give to Compassion and the time that people give to Compassion and the integrity that Compassion uses in that process. It is what makes Compassion effective, ultimately. And it's effective in terms of handling people's money. It's effective in terms of handling these children and their relationships and their life and their emotions and their education and all of those things. But ultimately, the reason that it impresses me the most is because it is effective in having integrity is what makes things that are spiritual effective, ultimately. There's no pretense. It is what it is. And that, to me, it makes offering the message of who Jesus is legitimate.
Make a difference today. Call Compassion now, 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
Well, one of my nieces called and was thinking about going to William and Mary for teacher's education. And I know at that point she didn't have a boyfriend. I said, you know what's going to happen? You're going to meet somebody at William and Mary in your same program. The two of you are going to come out there with about a $70,000 loan each. You're going to start your marriage with a $150,000 student loan. And for a teacher, think what impact that's going to have for you. So she went somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's a sad reality.
It's huge. And I know there are a lot of grandparents and parents that try to save for their children, grandchildren's education. But when you think about how much it actually costs, it's unbelievable how high it is, the student loan, and there are ways to fix it. But back to the misery index. Overall, what's the message you want to tell people that this index indicates? Because the research I did found the unemployment rate among recent college graduates with a bachelor's degree is 7%. And that doesn't take into account the 36.7% who have found jobs that were way below what a college graduate would be expected to accept. And that 36.7 compares to 27.4% under President Bush. So, you add that all up, and that's why you're seeing that 18%. So what does this increase say to you, Ashley, and why?
What it says to us is that young people are really hurting under this current administration, and they're the ones who are some of the president's most enthusiastic supporters. So I think now they're really feeling buyer's remorse from this administration, and they feel as though they were lied to, and they're feeling jaded, and they're feeling, very dejected and not very hopeful about their future. And I think that's a sad reality for many young people because, they did believe in hope and change, and now that's not what they've gotten. They've realized that economically they're worse off than they were 4 years ago, which, again, a very sad reality. But when the youth misery index has gone up 18.1% under one president alone, that should be astonishing to everyone when you look at the national debt and how much it has grown under this president, again, in his administration through his, reckless spending and economic policies.
President Obama talks about caring about jobs, and that's included in his policy and his views. So why aren't we having jobs increasing, particularly for the college graduates that you guys work with?
Yeah, in his State of the Union address, President Obama said that under his presidency, he had created 8 million jobs, which when fact-checked was done on it, I believe the number was actually less than 3 million. Which, again, another lie to the American people, which is just so disappointing, seeing as so many people are struggling in this economy. But young people are the ones that are really being hurt by this. They're coming out of college, there's no chance of jobs, but yet he's touting a record that says that he's, done a lot to improve our economy. But yet he comes out and says that, we need to do more for middle Americans because there has been no mobility. So it's almost as though, he likes to say that he created something, but what he's not taking any blame for is the fact that the economy is the way it is. And that's very disappointing, and I think discouraging for many young people who are out there wanting to work. And instead, what he's doing is, creating these big government programs and policies that is creating a dependent permanent class. And that's really, I think, what we should be looking at here is the fact that, he's trying to create a society which is very dependent upon the federal government. And what we're seeing in our polling is that young people actually want to be independent of government, and they don't want big government programs. In our latest poll, 48% of young people thought that the government was too big, as opposed to 4% who thought it was too small. So that tells you right there that they're fed up, they've had enough, and especially when it comes to this whole Obamacare issue, which is actually a job killer. You're seeing a lot of, health insurances be dropped, and a lot of young people are being affected by that, and they can't afford policies that they want them to purchase.
Well, before we get into the Obamacare in great detail, which I do want to discuss with you, because I heard some excellent comments you made on Fox News the other day, let's talk about the State of the Union, and as a business person as well. One of the things that we always had a saying in business is that you under-promise and you over-deliver. How did the State of the Union or President Obama not have the same view that I have about how you do it?
Yeah, I really don't think that he was genuine in his approach. He came off as very confident, and that confidence really came across as arrogant. And I think when you have so many people struggling the way that they are in this economy, what you really needed to do was address the American people and apologize. Now, again, I think that was asking for a lot, but when 43 minutes into the State of the Union, he finally got into the Obamacare mess and the healthcare exchange. That was just a complete disgrace. When you open by saying that you've created 8 million jobs, but then there's no upward mobility, or there's no way for middle Americans to, kind of move up in the ranks when it comes to their jobs, that's not that great of a record when you look at it. And then you continue on to this whole path of talking about how great government programs are, and then you eventually get to healthcare, which is what was on everybody's mind 43 minutes into the speech, and you spend about 6 minutes talking about it. After that's, your signature legislation and something that you've said is, an impressive record of yours, but yet you waited that long to talk about it, and the American people didn't actually get the truth or what they needed to hear from him. There's thousands, actually now millions of people who have been, denied insurance at this point, and they've lost their insurance, and they don't know where to go. And I think the best thing he could have done was to be honest and open with the American people, but all you saw was someone who did not want to be transparent and someone who wanted to kind of tout his own personal achievements. And that was really sad to me, and I think very discouraging for a lot of Americans who are looking for answers, not for more empty rhetoric from him.
Well, Ashley, I've recently been doing some reading and research on why people are liberals and why conservatives are conservatives. And we're going to have a future show here about that with a couple of psychologists, PhDs, on the very subject. But one of the things that seems to be what we'll say Democrats will do or liberals will do is that they'll focus on the appearance rather than the fact.
Yeah, no, that's certainly what they do, because they believe that what they're doing is truly helping people somehow, even though the numbers don't show that. So, for them to come out there and say, well, we have created this healthcare exchange for millions of Americans that are uninsured to get covered, but the number actually says that less than 10% of those that are uninsured have actually enrolled, that's a huge problem. That's showing that those that are uninsured, which is the population that they were trying to target, aren't buying into what the administration is selling. So for them to come out and say, oh, well, as a result of this, there's 9 million people now who are on a subsidized government program for health care, it's like, well, that's not the number that you were even close to wanting. So they're trying to now sell it to the American people as something that's a good package deal, when in fact, many Americans now are realizing once the exchange was open that it's not. But that's what it seems like. They see a number and they find a way to make it work for them, when really it's showing that, no one's really interested in these big government, handouts that are not a hand up. It is, in fact, a handout. And they don't want it. They want to be, independent. They want to buy into things that are more private or free market solutions. And instead, it just keeps becoming more of this big government and reckless spending administration. And I think that's what they'll, go down in history as doing. I don't think that they've really accomplished much under the Obama presidency. I think what they've done is they've had a lot of great ideas, when it comes to on paper, let's give everybody health care. But they never thought about the fact that they were expecting young people to pick up the tab and subsidize it.
Rebecca St. James for Compassion.
I think one of the big issues that I see in my own life, and I just see in young people, is this common selfishness. It's a complete battle to not live for self, because everything is saying, Rebecca, if it makes you feel good, do that. Please yourself. The culture is encouraging that in such a huge way. And I think compassion is an amazing way that we can be encouraged to live beyond ourselves. It's not about us, It's not about how we feel. It's more about serving Him and showing His love to a hurting world. And through compassion, you really actually get to see the need. Here is a huge need, and I can make a difference one child at a time.
To sponsor a child or to learn more, call Compassion now, toll free 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
Well, why is it that young people, Ashley, and I've heard you address this on Fox, why are they not enrolling, do you think, in Obamacare?
Well, you do have a tech-savvy generation with millennials, so anyone between the ages of 18 and 34. They're all really, at this point, expecting things to be as easy as kayak.com, which is what the president promised. And then you actually go onto the website, and there's a lot of issues with it. And, what's going to attract them to go back to a website that they know isn't going to work? There's nothing that will be able to do that for them. The security concerns, and then there was a point at which you had to fill out an application on paper. I don't know that anybody that's, close to my age would actually spend the time to do that. They would expect it all to be online and a smooth and easy enrollment, but that wasn't what happened. That was issue number one. Issue number two, those of them that actually did go to healthcare.gov saw a huge sticker shock, and they were like, wait a minute. I was told that I would be getting free health care, because that was basically what was, being spread around a couple years ago. And young people, very encouraged by that, were like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, what was never actually said was that health care was going to be subsidized on their backs. So the older and sicker generation would pay, less in premiums and deductibles than those that are actually, kind of what you would call the young invincibles, where they're young, they're healthy, they don't see any physical ailments. They might get a cold once in a while, but it's nothing that they can't get over the counter. So they're going to take the risk and not purchase health care. And I think what we're going to start seeing is that many young people will forego insurance and instead pay the penalty. Because it is cheaper in that first year. I think it's like $95 not to have insurance, rather than pay, a ridiculously high premium. And a lot of young people are seeing their premiums, double or triple in some cases.
Well, I thought the premium, or the penalty, we'll call it, the fine is probably the appropriate term
it's a tax.
for it, is up to 1% of their income.
Yeah, I think it ranges anywhere from $95 to $270 is the highest that I've seen it for people that have come to us. But we've actually had some former interns that have said, my dad's a doctor and we just lost our health care. So now we're spending time in the insurance exchanges. So when President Obama is coming out there and saying, well, there's 3 million young Americans under the age of 26 who are able to stay on their parents' health care plans, yeah, if they're one of the 6 million that didn't lose their insurance, that's great. But a lot of people would prefer, I think, to have insurance through their employer. But now you're, putting more regulations on small businesses, and they can't afford to, insure their employers anymore. And that's a sad reality. I think a lot of employees are being very, kind of hit hard by this, especially those that have little children and families. And there was just a piece done, actually, I think in Pennsylvania the other day where, they were filming employees at this one small business where they came in with their new insurance premiums under Obamacare, and all of them had gone up. None of them had gone down. And that's, again, something I think that's very real and that is starting to really infuriate a lot of individuals.
When I was an executive at Aetna, one of the first things I did was ask the executives, because we were doing a turnaround with Stephen Turner at the time, what is it that you're most afraid of in the insurance healthcare market? And they said, without question, it's that individuals will get control of their own healthcare insurance. And if they start buying it across state lines, or they start buying it like they buy car insurance, then the prices are going to go down, our profits are going to go down, the whole marketplace will be competitive. The healthcare companies know that insurance is not competitive. So as a result, of course, what they're doing is they're working their lobbyists and whatever to keep this structure going. And instead, when the young aren't enrolling, we're having adverse selection. So what do you think that all means for the fate of Obamacare?
Yeah, I
Ashley?
think there's going to have to be a bailout for Obamacare, and that's what, a lot of commentators have been saying recently. Because of the fact that they're not having enough young people enroll in this, because the administration was banking on 40% of the enrollees to be between the ages of 18 and 34. And what they've seen at this point, I believe, is only 24%. Now, the administration has said that, with a month to go, this is looking great for them.
They're only a month behind in enrollment.
Exactly.
I heard them say.
So, and I think that's a huge problem that they're not addressing, is that only 24% of what they need has actually enrolled. And if they don't get that, then the older generation, the sicker generation that are rapidly enrolling in this because they realize that their premiums will go down, they're going to have to bail out the program somehow. And I think that's what we're going to see. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. It's probably going to be another big government policy or a government bailout, to save this. But at the same time, they were really expecting young, healthy people to enroll, and that's just not happening because they can't afford it. I mean, if they were told originally that their premiums would double, what young person would say, yeah, sign me up? They're not. And now that they're seeing this huge sticker shock, there's no incentive for them to sign up for this. There's only an incentive for them to kind of, steer clear and be like, oh, well, I'm going to take my chances and not be insured because, I'm barely getting by. I have to pay back my student loans. If I'm on my own, I'm trying to pay for my rent, or I'm living at home because I can't afford to move out. So it becomes a very, I think, difficult situation at that point, and it's something that I think the administration really overlooked here was that, they want it to be wildly popular among young people, but in fact, it's very unpopular among them. No one's talking to each other about, getting covered or signing up to enroll for this. It's becoming more of a, we can't afford this, and what are we going to do about it?
Do you feel that there's a moral issue with Obamacare?
There certainly is. I mean, if you're talking more so about the mandates when it comes to contraception and stuff, and the Little Sisters of the Poor specifically, that whole case, that should have...
And the Hobby
yes,
Lobby.
It never should have been forced upon institutions or organizations or employers, small businesses that, have a religious or ethical, concern when it comes to providing those things for their employees. And instead, they're being told that this is what's going to happen. And then you see that, actually through Obamacare, there's really, abortions are being covered through it, and that's taxpayer funded. So, a lot of the, people on the left will say that the Hyde Amendment is in place, which doesn't allow for taxpayer dollars to cover abortions. But under the Obamacare exchanges, that's what we're seeing happening, because there might only be one option in some cases that, allow for that. And what we were told originally was that, there's going to be options and an opt-out if you, religious or moral issues, if you disagree with that. But there wasn't. And so, some groups actually took it to the court and said, no, we don't agree with this. We should not be mandated to do something that we disagree with. And I say good for them for speaking up and using their right, of free speech there and saying, no, we don't agree with this. You cannot force us to purchase something that we fundamentally disagree with.
Well, Ohio Christian University is where I'm at currently doing the show in the studio. And as a university, we're quite conservative politically, but biblically, we have a Christian worldview. And a lot of our listeners are fully aware of this, but I was curious about your spiritual leanings and how that impacts what you believe.
Yeah, I think, I attended the March for Life, maybe that was 1 or 2 weeks ago. Time flies. But that was my first time actually being able to participate in the national one. And we actually had a lot of our YAF chapters that participated in it as well.
Yeah, I've been at the very first one.
Yeah, it was incredible to me to see all these young people come out in support of the pro-life cause. And I think what we're seeing, and, Kristen Hawkins over at Students for Life is doing an incredible job with this, but really kind of energizing that youth base out there who, is pro-life. And I think what we've seen is because of, the breakdown of the family, especially with my generation, we're the ones who have really experienced divorce firsthand and the effects of it. So I think as a result of that, we started to formulate these more kind of pro-life views. And what you saw in Texas happen this year with, Wendy Davis filibustering on the, idea of 20-week abortions, they should be illegal, they should be an option for women. And you saw a lot of young people come down there and rally against it and say, no, we don't believe in this. If a child can live outside the womb at 20 weeks, this is not okay, this is not right. So when you're seeing more young people advocate for this cause, I really think the pro-life movement is advancing, and I think it's incredible, and I think that we will make some gains, as more Planned Parenthoods shut down across the country. And I believe the abortion rate, in a news article I saw this morning, it's gone down, and that's what happens as a result of, common sense legislation where we, value human life and human dignity.
How do you explain to people the factors that led you to be a conservative, well-educated, well-spoken?
Yeah, I had a family growing up that we ate family dinners, at the table, and it was...
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's something that kind of, I think, has gotten lost in translation is, that family unit. And it's something in society that, seems to be more of like a privilege now. And it's sad to me because my family, there was only 4 of us, my sister and I, and then my parents. But that was something that they instilled. But, we never discussed any policy topics in the house. But I went to Catholic school my entire life. And that kind of shaped a lot of my views on things. And that's why we actually provide these opportunities at Young America's Foundation for conferences and lectures to introduce students to the conservative movement if they did not have that opportunity growing up, if they didn't have a religious background, if they didn't, know much about the policies being enacted in their communities. There was a way for them to find out. And the foundation has always done a great job of promoting that, whether it be on college campuses or when we reach out to high school students. We actually have some high school chapters as well. But when we host these conferences for young people, it really engages them and opens their eyes to things that are happening right around them. So once they hear about it, they, get training from us, and they become very aware of their surroundings and realize that, I actually agree with a lot of what's being said. And then that's how you really advance the ideals of conservatism, I believe in. When you try to channel the legacy of Ronald Reagan and what he believed in young people being the future of this country. I think,
absolutely.
And I think that's an important thing to recognize.
Sure. I tell a story. I was standing in a little town. I was 12 years old, Mount Morris, Illinois, and he was a movie star, and it was just before he became governor of Texas. I wish. Governor of California. And he was in our little town, not very far from where he was born and raised. And he was standing over there talking to, I think, Senator Everett Dirksen from Illinois, and a couple other people. And he saw me just standing over there watching him. Well, he went away from the group, came over, shook my hand, stood there and talked to me for a little while, and then went back talking to these people. When I saw his care for what I'll call the little people, that sold me on Ronald Reagan and his core values. So that brings me, and I tell this story for a reason. What do you think the core values are of the Obama administration and others who maybe think the same way?
I really don't know, and I would.
What are they trying to get at, in other words?
What I honestly think, and this is, it might be a little out there, but what Reagan channeled was the idea of empowerment, individualism, and freedom. And what the Obama administration has done is radically different. It seems to be more a culture of dependency and this collectivism and this idea of, I really don't know how to put it other than the idea that you really need other people in order to succeed. And you saw that with the whole kind of, you didn't build that and all of this stuff. And it's very, I think, difficult to kind of now make the comparisons between the two, but when you break it down that way, you can really see the difference. Because when you see someone champion something like Obamacare, which, expects everybody to pay into the system, and it's very, unequal, which is, a whole nother issue when you look at income inequality, gender inequality, all these things that this administration seems to perpetuate when really there is no such issue. That creates this very dependent class, and I think that's something that, again, is being championed by this administration, where you need the government in order to help yourself. Whereas Reagan would have said, if you need it, take it. It's a helpful thing. But at the end of the day, many people believed in the idea of individualism and being independent. And, the programs were there to help you, but it wasn't meant to be a permanent thing. It was a temporary thing that many people used when they actually were in a dire situation. Now there's people, who are proud to be on these different programs, social welfare and everything. And there are some that genuinely need it. But when you look at the many abuses and the waste and the fraud that, kind of exist when in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare, all of these programs that have grown exponentially under this administration, but ones that really weren't abused during the time of Reagan. And I think that's an important distinction to really make here, is that it used to be, a very individualistic society where you worked hard to get to your American dream, and now it's kind of everybody shares a common dream, which isn't the same thing at all. They somehow think that if you're dependent on the government, you have every chance at success, but really it's holding them back and hindering them from ever being able to individually be successful and achieve their own American dream, I think. And I think that's where young people really will struggle later on in life, because they're kind of being held back right now because, they're burdened with debt and they don't know where they're going. Their careers aren't taking off. They're waiting, longer to have families, buy a house, and get married because they're things that seem unattainable at this point because of the fact that they can't afford these things. And I think that's going to cause a real crisis down the road.
You're absolutely correct. And having spent quite a bit of time in Western Europe and time with economists there and some other officials when I was with Halliburton and also since then, one of the things that is a problem for the young in Western Europe, they never hear any of the principles that you're so adept at explaining. You made a comment that when you're talking about the young people in this country, apparently, like you think they're not hearing the messages, don't you? And why is it that they're not hearing that, as if you and I didn't know?
I think they're not hearing it because they're being told these things, on their college campuses and wherever else, is that, these kind of liberal programs and ideas are the things that are being talked about. And to have these conservative opinions, it's kind of like a taboo, I think. And the sad thing is, many of these professors, there are some great ones out there, don't get me wrong, but there are some that really just, try to hammer home all of the great things this administration is doing, or so they think. But the problem is young people are really struggling because I think they're in a tug of war with themselves where they realize, I can't afford these things. I can't do things that I want to do. I've yet to accomplish things that I thought I could do when I was younger, these dreams that I was striving towards. And yet I'm being told that I have every opportunity before me. And I think that's a real internal struggle, because how are you supposed to navigate a job market that is not promising, that is not hopeful, where you're competing with hundreds, thousands, millions of other, people your age with the same experience? Because for so long now, we've championed the idea of mediocrity rather than the idea of standing out. And I think that's really detrimental to young people, because when you enter the workforce, or you have a new job, you expect to be the best at what you do, but by doing as little work as possible. And it hurts your feelings if your boss tells you, you're not doing exactly what I want you to do, because we've been coddled for so long. And I think that's, again, that internal struggle that we're feeling of, how are we supposed to make it on our own when we're told that we need all this help? And I think that's very different from, let's say 40, 50, 60 years ago, when we had young people, entering a draft, let's say, to go off to war. And now you're seeing young people that are joining the military because they believe it's their only option, type of thing. And there's that no sense of real pride in what you're doing. It's more of where am I going to get to next? I deserve this, give it to me, I need this, rather than this idea of, working hard to get where you are.
Taking charge of your own life, yeah.
Michael W. Smith for Compassion.
I cannot begin to tell you how crazy I am about compassion. I don't get involved in too many things, but I'll never forget 13 years ago I got asked to be involved with Compassion. And if I'm not mistaken, I think my answer was no, because I didn't know anything about them. But I said, I'll tell you what I'd love to do. I would love to sponsor a child, and then I would like to go see what you do. I'll never forget my first trip to Ecuador. It was just life-changing. I don't know if you've ever been to a third world country, but at some point, if you ever have a chance to go, it will change your life. But I went and saw Compassion's work and what they did nutritionally for the kids and then educationally. And then the most important thing was that they shared the gospel with these kids. And I'm convinced that there's hundreds of thousands of kids who have come to know Christ in a personal way through Compassion sponsorship program.
To sponsor a child or to learn more, call Compassion now, toll-free 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
Do you see media as a communications expert bias against conservatism and against, let's say, Christianity, religion as a whole?
Oh, yeah, you took the words right in my mouth, actually. I was just going to say, other than college campuses, I think the media has a large role to play in, how our culture is being shaped. And I think that's very sad, because you look at, primetime television, the things that are being promoted, it's very difficult, I think, to separate yourself as a young person from reality and what you're seeing in the media, because the media is now, it's becoming reality, sadly. You look at all of these reality TV shows, you've got Jersey Shore and whatever else, and young people are watching it, and it's absolutely, disgusting to me, some of the things that are being, kind of showed on there, but this is now what we've come to expect of reality television. And I think that's sad, because anytime you go against the grain and, try to promote something that has, conservative values in it, and it sells, like Duck Dynasty, for example, it's become very popular with people. And it's shocking to me that people don't see that. Like, they'll tune into Jersey Shore and they love it, and then they turn on Duck Dynasty and love it. And the two things that are being promoted are vastly different. And it's interesting to me in this day and age that Duck Dynasty has been able to do so well. And I think that's one thing that's really shocked a lot of people, because you look at it, they do family dinner. They pray around a dinner table. The ideals that are being promoted in the video are ones of family, ones of respect, and ones of tolerance. Whereas in other shows, you don't see that. You see, young people, swearing back and forth at each other. You see morals kind of being forgotten, and you see a real breakdown of family. And I think that's, something that it's definitely been fascinating to me to watch, because I was a big Duck Dynasty fan to start. And then when it became like this crazy popular show, I was like, don't people understand? Like, this goes against every other thing that's on television. And it's just really incredible to me how much that has taken off. And I can only hope that, young people that are watching it see these things and start to implement them in their daily lives and realize the importance of the values that, kind of the Robertsons portray. But yeah, when you see the media kind of promoting the president's agenda, and then you have reality television that's, it makes it very difficult for conservatives to spread their message when that's what young people are constantly being inundated with.
Well, I've been working on a book by the title of Tell Me It Ain't So. And those are some of the very points, because don't you agree that Congress, the administration, what we'll call the federal government, they're so vastly different in how they act, how they speak, and what they believe than the average American?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. And you see, I think a lot of the conservatives in Congress really struggling to relate their message because of the fact that it's always twisted or turned around by the media. And I think that's a huge challenge and an obstacle to getting our message out there, which is why it's so important for organizations like ours, to really advance the conservative movement by equipping the younger generation with tools to be able to, really get out there and advance things. Because I think that's something that really is a struggle for conservative leaders. How do we advance our message when we're constantly, facing these different challenges? So by equipping the younger generation, to go out there and challenge what the media is telling them and to challenge what their professors are telling them, I think in the long run that will prove very helpful for changing this culture and turning it around.
I think there's a similar problem, which we work hard here at Ohio Christian, and that is to give people the tools to defend their faith, to know why they believe what they believe and what the facts are behind it, and that believing in Jesus is a rational thing. Well, I think the same problem happens with these conservative views. When we start talking about free enterprise and individual liberties and limited government and rule of law and all these sorts of things, we have to be out there doing something about it with these people. So that brings me back to YAF. What advice do you have for parents first in helping their children, or in grandparents helping their grandchildren understand a lot of these principles?
That's a really good question. I guess what I would say is to be involved in their lives. And I think a lot of the time, and it's definitely become an issue now that we have technology and this culture of instant gratification where if you want something, it's immediately at your fingertips. And I think what is really lacking are those relationships, among family and your siblings and your mother and your father. And that's something that I think is hugely important that young people today are lacking, is that foundational relationship with their family, because it's so easy to turn on the television or turn on your iPad and put your headphones on and tune everything out around you. But what you're really lacking is that essential need of every human being to, have those relationships. We are relational in very much every part of our lives, but as we're kind of, inundated with all of this technology and, being able to have all of these things all the time, I think it's overwhelming. And when you break it down to the basics, I think it's very, very important for an instrumental in a young person's development for parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, relatives to be very involved in their lives and to, make sure that they know that they're there for them and that they can talk about these things in their house. I think that's important, or to at least challenge what they're seeing in the media. I think that's one huge thing. A lot of people just let their kids sit in front of the television, except there's no kind of oversight or guidance when it comes to that. So that is what is shaping their views, rather than having those kind of transformational conversations where it's like, well, why don't we talk about what we just saw on the television? I think that's something that's important. And I had growing up, and, now later in life, having all of this technology, yes, it's an advantage. It's a great thing to have, but I find myself doing it. At Christmas, I came home for a couple of days to New Hampshire, and I found myself sitting there on my phone. I'm like, what am I doing? I have this time to sit here with my family and my friends, and, they're not going to be here forever. And picking the brain of, your grandparents and being able to do that, it's such a huge asset. And I think now with this younger generation, growing up with this technology, I see it with my cousins. They can work an iPad much quicker than I can. And it's shocking to me because they're just sitting there with all of this stuff, but they're not really developmentally forming those relationships that we as human beings, fundamentally need.
We have 17 grandchildren, 4 kids, 17 grandchildren. So
My
we get
goodness.
a lot of opportunities. Yeah, really. The opportunities we have, and we try to take advantage of them. And my kids, they're all older, married, have children, of course. That's where these 17 grandchildren are coming from. But one of the things that I always did when they were growing up, and they bring this up all the time, and my son has a cup that he still has that he bought for me years ago when he was a teenager. And it said, "I'm a dad, I break for a lecture." With that, what he was implying is Dad won't drive by a billboard without showing a lesson in it. If he hears something on TV, we have to talk about it. And I think they feel indebted, I know they do, for those kinds of conversations. And so I say to the parents and the grandparents out there, look for every opportunity, even if it's just 5 seconds or 10 minutes or whatever you have. There are so many lessons out there because that's the way they're going to hear it. And grandchildren, frankly, love their grandparents, and they listen to them oftentimes that they don't listen to their parents. And let me ask you another question, but before I do that, what tools do you have at YAF for high school students and college? Because those that are listening and the others might be very interested in knowing what they can do about the problems we've just discussed.
Yeah, so if they were to go to our website, which is yaf.org, they would be able to go to the students panel on there, and they would be able to find all of our YAF chapters listed and resources for them as well.
And we'll put a link up to that.
Oh,
Ashley,
that would be fantastic. So if they visit the website, they would definitely see all the resources that we have available in our upcoming conferences. We also have internships available as well through our National Journalism Center, which is right here in D.C., which is a 12-week internship program where we help students who are interested in the field of journalism to become ethical observers. That way they can combat the liberal bias that somewhat exists in our media. I'll say somewhat, I'll be generous. But they can go out there and they can really challenge what is, going on in the media. And many have gone on to get jobs at, national media outlets, which is huge. The idea is to eventually get these very ethical journalists in there who can, objectively tell the truth and really report what is going on in our society. So that's another option for young people that are out there if they'd like to experience Washington, D.C. and really learn about media and journalism. We also have internships out at the Reagan Ranch in Santa Barbara, and we have internships out here at our headquarters in Herndon, which is about 18 miles outside of Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of opportunities available, a lot of resources. If students want to bring conservative speakers to campus, we can assist you with that. But all of this, again, is on our website, yaf.org, and we'd be happy to help if you wanted to give a call to the office as well.
Yes, and it was a speech that I heard by Ron Robinson that really got me involved in YAF. You've got a really great spokesman as a leader in that organization, and we appreciate the words that you're having to say. But before we go, because I know we're both running out of time, what do you see, Ashley, personally, not as YAF, but what do you see as the most pressing issues in America right now? There's so many,
yeah,
right?
if I had to break it down, I mean, when it comes to the economy, it's definitely the national debt. But I would say overall, it's the idea of the family. I feel like it's very disrespected in this culture because of the fact that, they're now taking incentives away from people getting married. Let's put it that way when it comes to taxes. And there's so many ways that people who are struggling economically, which is why I mentioned the national debt as a problem first and foremost, when they're struggling and they're, taking government assistance, there's now, penalties for people that are married or have children, which is preventing them from getting off of these programs because they don't realize the benefit to actually being married. And I saw a report recently that, single mothers are the ones who are really hurting right now, and those that are actually hurting are their children because of the fact that they tend to remain on these government assistance programs because there's no benefit to them being able getting off by, finding a husband and being able to have, that family unit. And I think that will ultimately be the downfall of our society here is the breakdown of the family and the fact that, our laws and policies now are kind of giving no incentive for people to actually preserve or promote the idea of a family.
That's a great point. Excellent. Before we get off, there's one last question that I often like to ask people, and I've gotten some interesting answers, so I'll ask you this. If President Obama walked into your office where you're sitting right now, what would you like to say to him? Dr. Norm Geisler, who is one of the faith leaders in this country, particularly for apologetics, defending your faith, when I asked him that, he said, I'd tell him to resign. He's ruining the country.
Yeah.
And when I talked with Russell Moore, who's now the head of the Ethics and Religious Freedom group for the Southern Baptist, he said to me, well, I was in his office last Wednesday, and President Obama asked me to pray for him. So I've gotten kind of, those sides, but I'm always curious what people might want to say to him.
I guess now that I've had some time to think about it, what I would say is, first I would ask him the question of, what kind of future do you want for Malia and Sasha, his two daughters? And at that point, if he tells me that he would like them to be able to get married, to pursue whatever career they wanted, to be successful, to achieve their American dream, to own a home, which I think would be what he would want, as any father would, then I would say, well, why is it that you don't want that for the majority of the young people that are out there right now? And I think it would get very heated at that point, but what I would suggest is, a lot of the policies that you think are bettering young Americans, it's actually hurting them, and you're saddling them with all of this debt, and you're putting the debt on the backs of the very people that you claim that you're trying to help. So I would just ask him to look into that, because I think that he would want, his children to be able to prosper and live the life that they've always imagined. But he's really, kind of crushing the American dream for a lot of young people that are out there today. So I guess that would be my question to him. But I did meet him back in 2007 in New Hampshire when I was going to college. He is very friendly, I will say that. There's no doubt that young people were very supportive of him for a reason. He's able to, really have conversations with young people. But I think, now they're very disenchanted, and I think he needs to hear that, if this is the type of life that he would want for his daughters, why is it that the American people that are out there don't deserve that as well?
Well, and as a lot of our guests have said, including Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich and a few of the others that we've had on here who are more intimately involved directly with some of that, they really believe that he thought the country would just be so willing to go in the direction that he wanted to go, that he's been really surprised. And as we heard from the State of the Union, he's going to work around Congress if he needs to. But, well, Ashley, you've been a fantastic guest on the show. I appreciate so much what YAF is doing there and your leader, Ron Robinson, and I think he made a great choice in bringing you into the organization. I think you're going to have a fantastic career in what you do. Thank you for the work of YAF and being so kind as to be on the show.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It's been great talking with you today, and I will be sure to pass that on to Ron for you.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of our host, Dave Garrison, I'd like to thank you for listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show today. For additional information about the show, please go to faithandliberty.org, where you can access previous shows, like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page, and access other resources. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If the show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. The opinions and comments represent the views of our speakers and may or may not represent the views of Ohio Christian University. May God bless you, and thank you for listening to our show.